Hi, this is Dr. Laracy, and this is the lecture on Stephen Crane's The Open Book. So this is kind of a difficult story to talk about because I want to talk to you about three different philosophies, and this is not a philosophy course, and so it'll be a kind of simple introduction to these philosophies. But if you remember in the introductory materials to the time period, it talked about how Stephen Crane, through the Red Badge of Courage, was really one of those who was thinking about the impact of war on American culture, and you see that in this story as well. And you also see another theme that was brought up in the introduction, which is the theme of naturalism, which really the philosophy has to do with the impact that the natural world or the real world has on civilization, on individuals. And one aspect of that is a theory known as determinism. And so your assignment is to find definitions of determinism. And the one that I really think is best is a philosophy definition that says determinism, like Darwinism, is not necessarily survival of the fittest, but that the outcome of things, even in human society and civilization, will be based only on things of the material world. If your muscles are strong enough, you'll be able to swim to the shore. If you know how to swim, you'll be able to swim to the shore. If you're not too far from shore, you'll be able to make it. Those are the things that determine outcome. If you were poor, then perhaps you didn't get enough food and therefore your muscles aren't strong enough, or you didn't get enough education and therefore you don't really know how to steer the boat to safety. Those kinds of things are determinism. What happens in the real world, in the physical world, determines the outcome. That is not to be confused with determination, which is really much more aligned with the concept of free will, which is that if you try hard enough, if you exert your will, then you can control the outcome of your life. And the third is fate, which is not to be confused with faith, although they're similar. But fate means that there is some sort of God or higher deity or something that's extra human or supernatural that cares about the outcome and is controlling it in some way, the outcome of your life. So the seven mad gods in this story really are an extra Christian mythological reference to being controlled by some sort of outside force, some sort of God that cares about what you're doing, knows what you're doing, and cares about the outcome, whether to help you or to hinder you. You know, your fate might be to fail, but that implies that there are some extra characters, personages, who care about what's going on with you. And so you see the correspondent in this story struggling with these three philosophies. On the one hand, you might see him looking at the birds and envying the birds their wings. That would be determinism. He might be talking about trying really hard and putting all their will into it, and that would be free will. But he might be talking about the seven mad gods, and that would be fate. And what's really fascinating about this story, what Stephen Crane really accomplishes with this story, is an amazing balance of these three philosophies. And so you can find quotes that seem to support one, and then you look at it again and it supports the other. And that's what I was trying to get you to see when I asked you to find some quotes that support each philosophy separately. And then when I gave you three moments in the story that seem to be, you would be able to interpret it in any of these three philosophies. So the three sections that I ask you to look at particularly are the repetition of the seven mad gods and the question of why he had come so far if only to drown. It seems to imply that he thinks that every person's life, every person's story should have a narrative unity. I've tried hard, I've come this far, I can see the shore, why would they let me drown? Why would the seven mad gods let me drown? But then he says, you know, he's heard of other people drowning and it didn't really seem to matter. And so that would be determinism. And also, he's talking himself into it. Why? That would be free will, talking himself into trying. There are several moments in the story where he and the others seem to have the decision to give up or to try harder. And then you see that in this sort of, yes, but I love myself response. If nothing really matters and nobody else cares, I care, and that's going to make a difference. Beyond the natural world, the fact that I care about myself will help me survive. But it's all of this logic that you go through when you're in danger of dying that Crane is showing us. The extreme logic that we are special, that our lives matter, that we can control whether we live or die. The quote, "a cold high star on a winter's night," is the word he feels that she says to him thereafter he knows the pathos of his situation, is very interesting to me because the star for a sailor is navigation. And that could be determinism, just the natural world helping you get home, helping you do what you need to do. The cold winter's night seems to be a lack of emotion, a lack of involvement. But the light is a word, and that's communication. And that seems to be fate to me, that there is some distant thing looking down, communicating some word. And that reminded me of the quote in the Bible, which says from John 1, 1 through 5, "In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. He was in the beginning with God. All things came into being through him, and without him not one thing came into being. What has come into being in him was life, and the life was the light of all people. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness did not overcome it." And I think about that verse when I think about the cold high star in all of that darkness speaking a word to him, and he the correspondent understanding his situation. I think that determinism, free will, and fate could all be wrapped up in that quote. And then at the end of the story, one of them has died, the one who's worked the hardest, who's had the strongest muscles, who's really rode his teammates, his life mates, into safety, has laid himself down to die because he had enough strength to row the boat, but he didn't have enough strength to row the boat and swim to safety. The others, though, swarmed by people and civilization, have become interpreters. And depending on how you read the story, as primarily about fate, as primarily about determinism, as primarily about free will, you would say they are interpreters of that reality, the pathos, the emotional situation, the emotional reality of their lives. And they are meant to interpret life events, or the message from God if you believed it was fate, or the lack of a message from anybody who cared if you believed it was determinism, or the message that if you try hard enough, if you love yourself, then you can make it. That would be the message they were meant to interpret. So you can see how all of these philosophies play together in the microcosm of civilization that is this boat with these few survivors going through the ocean in the dark night of the soul, trying to figure out how to survive and trying to figure out what their reality is. And then I ask you to consider what you think your reality is. Do you imbue magical thinking on your way to work? Do you say, God is just really not on my side today because it's raining so hard or because I've hit so many red lights? Or God is with me today because I have hit green lights and the sun is shining and I really feel the love of God? Or do you think, I'm going to try really hard. I feel down today, but I think if I push it, I can really make it? Or do you think, wow, if I was a little bit taller, a little bit stronger, a little bit naturally smarter, this would be easier for me and I could achieve? Which of the thoughts do you think, determinism, free will, or fate, really determine your worldview? And which of them do you think determines the outcome of your future, in your life, in your destiny? I'd love to hear from you on your discussion post in those philosophies.